So I had a lot of questions on it being unfamiliar to people on how to use a whole chicken, just that they're not super comfortable with it, they haven't done it a lot. Just because at the grocery store we're really used to just buying a big package of breast. But using a whole chicken is it's a really good way to get your money's worth, and it can be really convenient. And I'll show you some ways how. I'm not a good cook at all. My wife is the cook of the family, if you want it to taste good. But so I just put a whole chicken in already. You fill it up to the max line, and what's really nice about this is it makes bone broth simultaneously as making the whole chicken, and it literally just falls off the bone. You can throw in just minimally processed vegetables to kind of give the bone broth flavor and nutrients. But all I'm using is an InstaPot, and the benefit of this is a while back I used to just use a regular pot on the stove, and you have to babysit it for 12 to 14 hours, where an InstaPot is technically an hour and a half, but with startup time for it to heat up, it takes about 2 hours. You get about 4 quarts of bone broth, and you get chicken that falls off the bone that you can use the whole week for meals. So what I'm gonna do here is first I just have a half a lemon. I already cut up. I prefer organic because the peel's going in too. And I just stick it in here. There's nothing super technical about this. I cut up about 1 onion. I leave the skins on because that actually gives the bone broth more flavor and more color. So I'm gonna stick these in like so. And I think you'll really like how this turns out. We make a chicken noodle soup with the bone broth, and the flavor puts chicken bouillon to shame. It really does. So I got that. I got a really big bird in here. So we're gonna make it work, but it's a tight fit. I got ginger root, so just like one of the little legs of ginger root. Like that. My wife dried some rosemary, so I'm gonna put some rosemary in. There. I cut just a carrot in half. And then one of the last things is I just kind of take some garlic. Again, you can leave the skins on. My family likes a lot of garlic, so I'm putting a whole head of garlic in. What I really like about this is you really don't have to cut stuff up very much. There. I like to use some Himalayan salt. That's kind of our salt of choice. If you're type A, how I'm doing this might annoy you a little bit, but it's not an exact science. It can be an art how much of certain things you'll kind of find like, man, I like a lot of garlic, I like a lot of turmeric, I like a lot of onion. So feel free to make it your own. And we actually learned this from, I watch a lot of homesteader videos on YouTube to learn a lot of things about farming. And Sow the Land is a YouTube channel I like. And Lorraine actually made this recipe. We kind of made it our own, and it's just been super convenient for us. Take a little bit of turmeric. Got that in there. And that's it. That's all we're gonna put in the pot there. The next, I'm gonna get the lid here. I'll have to edit this part out until I get it on. There we go. So we close it, plug it in. And pressure cook time. I'm just gonna go up to an hour and a half. And it'll start itself. Cool. Alright, so this just finished up. It's about 2 hours later. And the first thing we're gonna do is release the pressure. It's gonna be loud. And we'll let that go. So we released all the pressure. Something to keep note of is the warmer will actually stay on through the process of even after it turns off to keep your food warm, but you want to turn that off because that'll allow the bone broth to cool down so you can start to put it in mason jars. But following that, pressure's off, burner's off, I'm going to open it and then we're going to let it cool down for a little bit right here. If you want to take a look at that, it looks delicious. See how it's just falling off the bone right there. It's real easy to process and safe for your week for lunches and dinners to add them to meals. Alrighty, I'm going to start deboning the chicken so I can save it for this week's meals. Get some of the bones out here. You can kind of see how it's just sliding right off the bone. It's hard to even get a hold of it. Alright, so I deboned the meat, so we just have the broth left and some of the ingredients to create some of the flavor. So I'm just going to lift this up out, and then we'll take it over to the sink and we'll strain it out. So now we're going to come over, start straining it out. Oh, that smells really good. Yeah. Got some ploppers there. And now I'm going to lift up on it. We'll get all that broth out. And you just made about 8 quarts of homemade pasture-raised bone broth. So to pour the bone broth in, I prefer to freeze it rather than can it. So what I do is I always use wide mouth mason jars, and I leave a good bit of head space at the top of the jars just so there's room for expansion as it freezes. But always use wide mouth, and then what you'll need to do is pour it in here and let it sit on the counter to get room temperature, then let it sit in the refrigerator overnight, and then start to put it in the freezer, because you don't want that big change in temperature to happen, because that's what will crack your jar. So as long as you're using wide mouth and you kind of transition it to that temperature, you'll be fine. All right, so now I'm gonna ladle it out. So I'm here, some nice rich bone broth. And you'll notice once it cools down, you'll start to get a little bit of like, it'll almost turn into a little bit of jelly. So it's a good sign of bone broth when it starts to harden and get that kind of jelly-like texture. That's the sign you got a really good bone broth. And you can kind of shake it and wiggle it a little bit. So good. So good.
I love it.